Texas district, but we were in West Texas. But had a fellow pastor who one day on Mother's Day, the day preceding, or the Sunday, I think, preceding Mother's Day, was making an announcement that they were going to sell baked goods, pies and cakes and all of that kind of thing for Mother's Day. And so he made this announcement. He said, now, men, you can buy your wife flowers for Mother's Day. They'll fade. You can give her all sorts of things, and it'll probably pass away. He said, but buy her one of these cakes and pies, and you can see it on her hips for the rest of her life. That pastor's dead now. Amen. So I'm not going to say that this morning, but I will tell you this. Honor your mother today. Amen. Give great honor to her. Praise the Lord. And this morning we're delighted to have someone who can speak with authority about being a mother. I've often thought that, men really, if we're going to talk about Mother's Day, it has to come straight out of the book, or else we have nothing to talk about, because we have no clue about what it means to be a mom. And so this morning, we're delighted to have Traci Hyslip to come and to address us on Mother's Day. Amen. God bless.
Good morning. I thought the pulpit should maybe be up here because it makes me about a couple feet taller, and then I could speak over you instead of under you. And even this is like super high. I should have worn high heels today. So anyways, happy Mother's Day. Welcome if you're visiting and you're a mom. I just want to welcome you to Wasilla Assembly. For those of you that don't know who I am, my husband Brandon, the tall one in the blue, we are the youth pastors here at WEG. And we have been here at WEG for quite a long time. Him longer than I have, though. But and we have 3 little children, under 3. And I remember when I was a senior in high school, I visited my cousin who had 3 boys under 3. And I visited her and stayed at her house for a couple days, and I thought, dear God, I am never having children this close. And lo and behold, here I am, 3 children under 3. So if you ever tell God that you don't want something, you should very, very be careful about what you pray for, because you can pray good, and you could pray, God be like, here you go. So anyways, but I kind of jumped on the opportunity to preach today because I feel like I have a testimony in the areas of being a mother and Mother's Day. But Mother's Day 5 years ago, I would have never have guessed that I would be up here preaching about Mother's Day. It would not even be something I would have considered. So growing up, my mom was absent from my life mostly. Her addiction to alcohol, kept her from being the mom that she was called to be and supposed to be in my life. And there were good days, and then there were bad days with my mom. For the most of my childhood, she was part of our house. And in about middle school, our parents got divorced, and she's still in the valley with us, but she wasn't in our home, but she was still around, just because I guess she knew that she could rely on us, I guess, to come back to our house. And mostly it was she would be gone, and then she would come and sleep on our couch at night. So I'd wake up in the morning and she was sleeping on our couch. But most of the part, she really had an absence from my life and my brother's life because of that addiction. And in that sense, I didn't have the mom that I was supposed to have to show me how to grow into a young woman. Thankfully, I had spiritual moms through WEG in this church that really took the time to speak into my life and step into that mom position that was missing in my life. Mindy Lopez, many of you know, she was my youth pastor when I was a youth group. And Vicki Pridgeon, they were mainly the two women that I really clung to for advice and wisdom in times that I didn't have that mom to talk to about issues that, I was going through as a teenager, as a young woman, and figuring out who I was in life. And Vicki is so much my spiritual mom that I call her mom or Mama V. And like if I introduce her, I'm like, hey, this is my mom. And people kind of like, in case you don't know Vicki, she's black. And people like look at me and they're like, don't get it. And I'm like, you don't see I'm black? I'm like, my name is Angela, okay? You best be listening. And I mean, she is my mom. And like, she is like the person that I go to for everything. She was the first person I called when Brandon asked me to court him. She was just, in a sense, she was just, I mean, I have no way to explain it except she was my mom. I don't even question the fact that she didn't give birth to me. In times of hurt, when I had issues with my mom growing up, they were the people that I really, really sought after when I was hurting so bad from things that my mom would do. Because even though she wasn't essentially living at our house, a lot of instances would happen where I would be hurt. There was a time that I got a call one day from troopers that they were asking me to come pick her up. There was a domestic dispute, and she needed a ride to leave. So I went and drove to this house and picked her up, and I guess what had happened is there had been some sort of fight and hitting, and my mom had gotten hit, and so I picked her up, and I was like, oh, where do you want me to take you? And she just had me take her to a bar. And so I was like, are you sure? And she's like, yeah. And so I dropped her off at the bar, and I went and parked in a parking lot, and I just cried. And I called Mindy, and all I needed was just words of love, just to tell me that it was going to be okay, that I couldn't control what was happening, but God could control what was happening. And I couldn't do anything really in front of me to change it, but I could just pray. And Mindy was really, good to point that out to me. And as much as it hurt me, it caused a lot of hurt of me to go through things like that with her. I'd get stealed from, I'd get just talked down to. There's so many instances that I could have so much reason to be bitter and to hold unforgiveness towards her that it's insane. I could list thing, just of things that have happened that should be like, well, you did this, and you did this, you did this, therefore, I don't like you. You know what I mean? And I enrolled in Master's Commission after I graduated. In the summer, woohoo, MC for life. The summer before my first year, I was given the opportunity to go and work in Homer at my future in-laws, although I didn't know it, Halibut Charter. And during the summer there, we would attend Homer Assembly of God with Pastor Greg. He's an amazing pastor. And if you guys could go start handing out those things. I heard a message one day that he preached that really struck me on forgiveness. And he preached that the unforgiveness that we're holding against people is keeping that person in bondage. And it kind of became real to me that everything that I was holding up against her was keeping her from getting set free. And he gave each person a get out of jail free card, which they're passing around, which I don't know if anybody played Monopoly before. And it was kind of like a visual to like show you that it's that easy. That if you just forgive them, they're getting out of jail for free. And he had us write down the things that we were holding against a person, people, event in their life or whatever. He had us write it down on a paper, and then we nailed it on a cross that was in the sanctuary. And what's funny is I had heard this message before when I went to summer camp, which plug, summer camp is coming up for youth, and it's really awesome. Sign up. So Pastor Jen had preached this message, and I kid you not, it was like very similar. We did the same thing. We actually nailed a cross on a cross. She gave us a cross to put on a necklace to remember what we had did. But at that stage in my life, it's not that it didn't mean anything, but I didn't have an understanding of what the power of forgiveness could do for somebody. And I actually still had that nail from that summer camp. So that summer, after I'd heard that message, God really just spoke to my heart about forgiveness. And I was obviously down in Homer. I wrote my mom a letter, and I basically, I asked her for forgiveness for all the things I was holding against her. I told her that I would not stop praying for her, that she needed to be delivered from her addiction, and that I prayed that God would do that in her life. And I explained to her, I mailed her the card. No, I think I kept the card, but I mailed her that cross, that nail from the cross from summer camp. And I explained what it meant and what forgiveness she could have in God. And I mailed it, and I didn't really know, what would come of it. I just kind of needed to get it out there. And come later, find out that she still had that nail. If you want to turn to Proverbs 17:9, we have them on the screen. It's not exactly the translation I'm going to read out of, but it's the translation is New Living Translation. It says, "Love prospers when a fault is forgiven, but dwelling on it separates close friends." So I sent that letter off, kind of just taking the first step, I think, in what God was going to do in my life. I didn't know it was coming, but I know that was the first step. MC started that year, and we had orientation week with Jamie Montera, who's a evangelist. He filmed us and asked us what we wanted to see this year, and I remembered that I said something like, I wanted to see my mom healed and delivered from alcoholism. And I remember I said that, and little did I know that thing I said, it was going to be a process, but it was going to happen. And so the year went on, and I would pray, God, change me, God, work in my life, the things that MC students pray. But you keep praying it because God will do something. A lot of the hurt that happened in my life with my mom really affected who I felt I was. I was really ashamed of being Alaska Native. I was ashamed, and I didn't want to be associated with the prototype of what an Alaska Native is. And a lot of you that live here, you always see Alaska Natives, on the street, that they drink a lot. And it's the truth, because it's such a heaviness over the state in villages. That is what happens in Alaska. And that is, God needs to come in and deliver Natives from alcoholism. But I was ashamed that I was even associated with that. I didn't want people to know that, my mom was an alcoholic. And even in high school and middle school, I was ashamed to let people come to my house because I didn't want them to see my mom because of how she was. We went to villages my first year, Stebbins and St. Michael and Kotlik. And I was excited because I had never been to a Native Alaskan village. And I prayed. I'm like, okay, God, what are you going to do? And he really opened my eyes so much when we went out to the village of, I wasn't ashamed anymore, but I opened my eyes to the hurt that was out there, and the bondage and the alcoholism and the depression and the suicide that was in the villages. And he started to really work in my heart, beginning when we traveled to the village, about, I'm not necessarily Yupik or Tlingit, I'm Aleut, and so we didn't travel to the parts of Alaska that my heritage is from, but it's no different. It's the same problems. And he really opened to my eyes, and he gave me a love for the Native Alaskan people through going to those villages, and just a heart to see God change in their lives. And it's like I could really associate, because I could see the same bondage that some of the adults were in was carrying down to the children. And it's like, it's all they knew was alcoholism and suicide, and it was like a normal. And I knew that, my calling would be to set them free. I didn't know how, I didn't know what way or how. I still don't know how, but I know it's part of who I am because I have an authority in this area. We left the village. We came back, and we had a ministry come to the WAG one time on a Wednesday night. They were called Broken Walls. I don't know if you've heard of Broken Walls. Bill Pregrin works with them, and they minister through native drumming. The name Broken Walls says it all. They minister healing through drumming. And I have no idea, any sort of tradition that my native people do. I don't do it because I didn't grow up, in the rural villages. I don't know how to dance native at all. But when they were drumming, I felt led to dance. And I remember I was right here, and I just started dancing. And I don't know what I look like. I just felt like this was the way to do it. And I danced that whole time that they were drumming. And I believe that night, the walls of my heart came down. And it was just another step in the process of healing, because now that the walls were down, I could really begin to heal. The walls that I were keeping up of being ashamed and not wanting to be who I was really started to come down. Matthew 5:23-24. This is the Message translation, which is also not up here, but you could read. I apologize if I'm talking fast. I'm nervous. So I typed this out and thought, oh my gosh, this is so much, but I knew I'd probably fly through it. So Matthew 5 says, "So if you are presenting at the altar in the temple and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar. Go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God." This is one of my memory verses in Master's Commission. And it's amazing because it's basically saying that restoring relationships is so important that Jesus said it takes priority before offering and before worship. And I had heard this verse, and what my understanding was, to me, I had been taught that it only applied to communion. Because I know whenever you take communion, if you have something wrong with somebody, you want to make your heart right, And that's what I had believed. So when I read this, even now I read this verse, and I was like, wow. It is so important to heal what has been broken before you even bring your offering into church. And it tells them to leave and then come back when it's right. I don't want you to leave right now, but if you're, but I even read this just preparing for this message, and I was like, wow. That says something about restoration and healing of relationships. You know what I mean? What it also says to me is that you are supposed to take the initiative, not the other person, because it says if someone has something against you, you are supposed to go and reconcile. And I was like, wow. Because like I said before, I could have pages of stuff that happened in my life that would be reason to be so offended and to be so bitter to God even, why it was happening in my life. And the verse is saying it's your job to go and make it right. It doesn't matter if the person has wronged you, but you go and make it right. Unrestored conflict blocks our fellowship with God. My second year of Master's Commission began. I did 2 years as a student and a third year as a staff. I was more wise then, as you are when you're a second year. I MC. Any person that is in Master's Commission knows that your schedule is insanely busy. But I began to see my mom here and there in between the busyness that we had. And it wasn't like, best friend times, but it was time that we just spent talking. And she had still had that nail at that point from that letter. We didn't really, I actually can't remember what she said about it, but I just knew that she had it. So I knew that she got it, which was a good thing. But that year, God really still worked in my heart. I wasn't completely healed. And I knew that there was still more to be done. We went on a retreat one time to a cabin, and we were just having prayer time, and it was almost just like God it was like deliverance. I mean, straight on just sobbing, because just the power of God just hit me, and I was so broken and sad. I mean, I don't let it affect me if something happens to me. I don't be like, this happened in my life, therefore I have the right to act mean. But I began to just sob because I was just so hurt. And I was hurt for my mom because she was abused, and I just felt just so heavy for her because I couldn't do anything to help her. And Pastor Scott, he prayed over me, and I released her. I mean, I had done, I'd asked for forgiveness, but obviously in my heart, I still hadn't actually forgiven her. And I just released her, and I prayed that I would forgive the people that have abused her, that I would forgive those that have wronged her, because I was even hating that person that beat her. And I knew that it was going to take God to do a miracle. I mean, I know if anybody has dealt with an addiction that I've never dealt with an addiction, but I know it's hard to get rid of. And the Dream Center could probably relate. It's not just something you can drop one day and the next day be fine. And so I knew that the level of alcoholism that she had would take a miracle to stop. After that, deliverance a little bit, it was more free. I felt that year when we went back to Stebbins and Kotlik, I felt more authority preaching my story. It was pretty amazing. And that was in 2008. March of that year, I had gotten a call that she was in the hospital and they'd found her unconscious, on the streets in Anchorage. And we went in and saw her, and the doctor said basically she was in liver failure, and that if she continued to drink, she was going to die. And I didn't know what to do. I just prayed. Brandon, at that time, we were recording, and he was with me, and it was amazing to see his heart for her because he just wanted to see her healed. That night, I spent the night with her, and I kind of got a chance to talk to her about the Lord, which was really cool. I asked her if she had ever said the sinner's prayer, and she said that she had, and she explained to me what she prayed. And she actually prayed, "Our Father art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." And I explained to her that there's a little bit of difference between the sinner's prayer and that. And so I actually was, throughout that night when I was talking to her, I was able to walk her through the sinner's prayer, because at that point, that's all I knew what to do. In my eyes, I thought she was going to die, and I thought that's what I could do. Luckily, she ended up leaving the hospital. She got better. She wasn't healed. She got better. But she went, and at that point, I was trying to think of things. I was like, okay, she cannot go back to the situation she was in. She can't. She's going to drink if she does that, and I knew it. And I want to say something to the Dream Center guys. It's important that I think when you're in this program and you're being delivered and you're being set free, to not go back to where you were. because it will set you back, and you're just, yeah, I just want to say that. So I prayed, because all I knew was, God, she cannot go back to where she is, God, and she needs healing. And I just prayed. And sadly, she went back to live with her boyfriend, who eventually, actually, at that point, it was her husband, who was not a good guy. And it just broke my heart, because I knew that wasn't good. And I knew that God had to do something. And so I just prayed. I went on with Master's Commission from March to May, and that's why I said that Mother's Day 5 years ago, I would have never guessed I would have been here. But Mother's Day 5 years ago, I was given the opportunity to honor my mom, which is something that I have never done. I had never done up until that point, was honor her. At that point, I only had, down-talked her. I had only dwelled on the things that were bad in her. And Master's Commission did the service that morning. We were about ready to leave for Southeast, and I had some flowers, and I just honored her. I don't remember what I said, but she was sitting right there, and she came up, and it was a pretty amazing moment in my life that I was able to do that. And that was the last time that I had saw her. We went to Southeast in the 26th of May, which was just a few weeks after Mother's Day. She passed away. Her liver failed due to alcoholism because she went back to where she was. I dealt with her death different, I think. I was really sad, but I was more happy because I knew that she was well, and I knew that she was healthy in heaven. I did grieve, but I was more joyful because clearly anywhere but here was better for her. If she couldn't get rid of the addiction, then there she is free. Brandon and I got engaged a few short weeks later, and my bridal shower was that summer, and my friend Jamie Bottoms, she gave me this painting of hers. She had remembered that I had said something that I really liked it when I had first saw it at one of her art shows. And so she gave it to me, and a friend framed it for us. And I'll tell you why. This painting really spoke to me. It is called Restoring the Mothers. And I really felt when I saw this painting, that wasn't necessarily me that was pregnant in the picture, but I knew that God would restore my life. And I knew that he would restore the relationship between me and my children. I knew that I was going to have children. And I knew that I was determined that with God, I would raise my children differently than how I was raised. And this painting, it was like God spoke to me and said that you're going to be redeemed. And I knew specifically that I was going to have a daughter. My husband jokes, people would ask us how many children we would have, and he said, well, she's got to do the work. And I knew I wanted a daughter, so he's like, she'll do it as much as she gets a daughter. And I said, well, I'll do it as much as I can until I get a daughter. And thankfully, it was just my second child. And I actually have 2 daughters, and so I'm blessed with 2 daughters to redeem what I had lost. This painting also spoke to me is that I knew that I would change my family tree. I knew that the generational curses that were passed down were not going to be my generational curses. I knew that there was going to be no alcoholism, there was going to be no abuse, there was going to be no running away from the situation and abandoning my children. I knew that that's not what God had for me. And I had enough faith to believe and fight that those generational curses would not be mine. I felt that the title of this painting, Restoring the Mothers, was not just for me, but it's something that I can preach out of experience, that God is going to restore the mothers in the church. And not only the mothers, because I prayed about this. I didn't want to just focus on the moms, but he's going to restore the fathers. He's going to restore what has been lost. I felt that women, young and old, child or childless, would be mothers to a motherless generation, and fathers too. My heart, now that I have walked through this in my life, is to see the mothers rise up, to see them be the spiritual mothers that they are called to be. I grew up with a stepdad who was as much as my dad as my real dad was. My stepdad actually raised me, and my real dad was absent from my life. So I know the power of a father's love, and he wasn't even my real father, but I don't consider him my stepdad. I knew that without the spiritual mothers, I would not be who I am. And I think it is important to know that the spiritual mothers are important, and the spiritual fathers are important. That today's Mother's Day, but if you don't have any children, you're still a spiritual mother. So happy Mother's Day to you too. I know that spiritual moms are needed, and I can tell you from experience that I was a daughter hurt by a mother, and now I have a chance as a mother to turn around and raise my daughter right. Thank you. My question is are you a mother and father? You might not be an actual mother or father, but you can be a spiritual mother and father too. And it's, will you be that mother and will you be that father? Will you be that mother that makes things right with her children? Or will you be that spiritual mother who takes up the challenge to mother a motherless generation? Mothers and fathers. I know, and this is in closing, I really prayed about an altar call because I didn't want to, leave out the fathers. I feel like there's a call, and I think this is coming from experience, that there's a call to answer to be a mother and to be a father. I know when I was in Master's Commission, obviously I wasn't with my family, but I needed a mom. And I know Miss Jackie, you're a mom, if she's in here. I can't seem to find anybody while I'm talking. But I know that there is spiritual mothers, Miss Gina and Miss Jackie. And my challenge to you is, will you answer that call? Or are you a mother and a father who needs forgiveness, who needs to forgive your mother and father, and maybe that the way you were raised is affecting how you are raising your children? Maybe you need to change your heart and ask for forgiveness. I believe that there is hope to restore what has been broken, but it takes praying and fighting and believing, but I think mostly it takes an open heart to allow God to change you. And that's why I think when I heard this message of forgiveness in high school, it really meant nothing because my heart wasn't open to it. Daughters and sons, maybe it's time to examine your heart and free the person that you've been holding unforgiveness towards. Maybe it's your mom or dad, maybe it's a friend, I don't know. And maybe neither of these apply to you, but I believe that there is a call to answer to be a spiritual mother and father. And I thought maybe you're just a mom who needs to just sit in God's presence. So if Elizabeth, if you want to come up. As I was writing this message, I was remembering things and just writing things out and kind of reminiscing, and I cried at some points because it hurts me, like Pastor Lattis said, that I cannot tell my mom I love her. Because when I did have that chance, I wouldn't have told her. And then I cried because I'm so thankful for the spiritual mothers that rose up in my life.